Hello everybody, welcome to Little Rusty Bucket. Subscribe with the channel and drop a like on this video. Trying to hit 30k subscribers over here, so that subscription would be much appreciated. I am going through that intro fast because this video is probably going to be annoyingly long. I am going over Bleacher Report's top 100 players of all time, which is the exact type of content that this channel is built for. Just complete meaningless, arbitrary bullshit, but nevertheless, let's get into this meaningless, arbitrary bullshit. This was a very controversial list, and I want to say up the top, I am sympathetic to the apparently multiple people were involved in making this. I don't think it's possible to make a top 100 players of all time list that is not going to get a million people telling you it's stupid and dumb and wrong. That is kind of a reason that I have avoided making like all-time lists and the top 50 players of the season or whatever. Still do it from time to time because it's an easy video to slot in, but there's really no way to win when you make that kind of content. People get mad at you, people yell at you, and it's because the diversity of opinion is just dramatic. There's simply too many people who think too many things. Like I saw someone quote the Bleacher Report shit. It was like, dude, LeBron's not even top 10. This list is fraudulent. It was like Jerry West under Kevin Durant. What the fuck? Like, people got different perspectives. There's no way to please everybody. You're inherently going to do some crazy shit. But I have seen a few of the rankings from this before going into it, and there's definitely some crazy stuff in there. So I'm not gonna, because there's 100 fucking names here, I'm not gonna piece by piece label where I would put each person, but I will say if anything is stupid and flagrant and whatever. MJ at 1, LeBron at 2. I have always argued that it's essentially they're tied. You can share whatever point of view that you want to about who's better, but I don't actually have a strong opinion between the two of them. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar at the number 3 spot is the most common answer to who is the third greatest player of all time. Pretty universally, Kareem ends up at that number 3 spot, which is why I personally consider him overrated, because who they have at number 4, I just think did more at his absolute peak. You know, Kareem, he is a 6-time champion, but only one of those championships was he the definitive, by far and away best player on the team. Actually, there's probably like 1, maybe 2 of those in the Lakers years. But like the fact that Magic was the best player for 3 of Kareem's 6 championships, I just think it's weird that Kareem's career got bolstered by that duo more than Magic, and it's treated more like a duo than what it actually is, which is for more years than not, Magic was very clearly by far and away the better player, but Kareem was also fucking phenomenal and just owned the 1970s and has insane numbers, insane accolades, and played 20 fucking years. So if you want to have him at number 3, it's really hard for me to argue with you on that. I think that's perfectly valid, and I like Magic Johnson here at number 5. Bill Russell at number 4. Bill Russell at number 5. Hard to argue with it. I wouldn't put him there, but that's just because I'm not valuing his championships the way that other people do, and I understand that. Shaq at number 6 is interesting. Where I'm wondering is, what is the criteria here? What is being valued more? Because to me, Shaq is like the pinnacle of like peak in terms of what his peak looked like relative to the rest of his career. That's not to say that he was not good for other points in his career after like 2002, but from 97 to 2002, Shaq's peak as a center is about as good of a peak as you're going to get. But Bill Russell has way more hardware, so he gets placed over him. But Kareem also has far more longevity, but I feel like you're only going to place Shaq this high because of his peak. So I don't know. That's an interesting one there. Tim Duncan at 7, that's perfectly fine. Larry Bird at 8, that's perfectly fine. I personally have Tim Duncan over Shaq. I also have him over Bill Russell, but I have no qualms with that. Something I say a lot is like, the top 2 guys of all time should be everyone's top 2. There are people who want to be different. There's people who want to act like it's not LeBron and Mike for different reasons. It's stupid and silly. They're the top 2 players of all time. However, number 3 through like number 12 can kind of be mixed up a little bit. If you have Larry Bird at 4, I think that's reasonable. And if you have Larry Bird at 11, I think that's reasonable. It really just depends on what your personal criteria and logic is. At number 9, this is the first one I want to have beef with, Wilt Chamberlain. Wilt Chamberlain is not a top 10 player of all time, in my humble opinion, which it is a very humble opinion. I'm the most humble. Wilt, to me, is empty stats is way too simplistic of a term to use, but his winningest seasons came when his numbers went down. His scoring, the seasons where he was at his highest volume scoring, were when he was his least effective as a winner. And like right here, you see this big front load thing about what he averaged at the start of his career, and that is always the story. The 100-point game, the 50-point per game season, setting the record for the most rebounds in a game. Like, those numbers are the reason that he will be put here. But when you look at his winning impact, there's a reason Bill Russell was winning MVPs over this guy all the time. And then in the late 60s, mid to late 60s, he goes to the Sixers. He focuses more on being a playmaker and defensive player, and he ends up winning MVP 3 times in a row, wins a championship in 1967, the only team besides for the Celtics to win a championship in the 60s. So I just feel like his actual peak is undervalued, and then his just crazy high scoring seasons get overvalued. And I don't know, it leads to him having this weird place in history. But me personally, like, I will take a guy who I know is going to be great pretty much regardless. Like, give me a Stephen Curry, give me Kobe, who is at number 11 and over Steph, and then Steph is over him rather. And then you have Hakeem right after that. I would take Steph, I would take Kobe, and I would take Hakeem over Wilt Chamberlain rather easily. But I'm just Wilt's biggest hater. If you want to see an extensive video on my thoughts on Wilt and the place that he holds in NBA history in terms of just like winning versus stats and all of that, we have a deep dive called the Wilt Paradox. Numbers can be deceiving, or numbers when numbers lie, something like that. With Stephen Curry in the top 10, this is becoming an increasingly more popular opinion. I feel like you've started to see him getting in these top 10 conversations more as after he won the championship in 2022. I am perfectly okay with that. I think he belongs in that top 10. I'm also okay with him being over Kobe. I have Kobe at like 9 or 10. And I know this was the most controversial one, or at least seemingly the most controversial one, because there's a lot of people who think Kobe is the GOAT. Good for you for thinking that, but I'm so strongly disagree, and that's with Kobe being my favorite player ever. At the same time, I've kind of been thinking lately that Steph is virtually tied for that, so I'm okay with Steph over him. I think Steph's the better offensive player, Kobe's the better defensive player. It just depends on what you value more. Also, more accolades and all of that. Not as many MVPs, though. But Hakeem Olajuwon, I think, got a little bit disrespected here at number 12. I think Hakeem belongs in the top 10. His accolades are quite good, and his peak is fucking phenomenal. And though he has a lot of whatever years towards the tail end of his career, he still had quite a bit of longevity as well. So I think he should be in the top 10. I would remove Wilt, and I would probably personally have Bill Russell at like 11. It's all about personal value systems, and I think people get way too judgmental and harsh on people for not having the same system. Like, I don't have Kevin Durant at 13. There's a couple of players I would have over him. Oscar is not one of them. Nor is Jerry West, but Kevin Garnett is, Jokic is, Dirk is not, but I could see it. David Robinson is not. Julius Erving is not. I'm trying to think, who's this other motherfucker? Like Dwayne Wade. I have Dwayne Wade very high on my all-time list. I have him over Kevin Durant, which was probably the most controversial opinion of my Kevin Durant hater manifesto. I just value a peak a lot, but I also specifically value if you have a championship run as the number one guy, that like definitive number one guy, that does wonders for you in all-time ranking from my personal perspective. That's why I also like Giannis is another guy who I would have over Kevin Durant, because like that championship run in 2021, like when you have that on your that's the most important thing to have on your resume to me. Championship is a number one, you're stamped. That's a superstar who won the championship. And obviously there are instances where you get like a Chauncey Billups in 2004. But if I'm talking like what Tim Duncan did in 2003, what Dwayne Wade did in 2006, what Dirk did in 2011, those go very, very far towards your all-time ranking for everybody, but especially for me, that is the first thing that I'm looking for. And then after that, we can talk about the other shit. But if you don't have that, it's hard for you to get ranked over someone who does have that. Now, I also have KG over Durant, who does not have a title run where he is the definitive best player the whole way through. I do feel like he was the best player on the Boston Celtics for that 2008 run, but it was more of a egalitarian approach to how that team worked. But I don't even know if we're going to get into the 100s because it just gets super niche at that point. Dirk, I feel, is just a little high. Just a little high. Not by much. Moses Malone, shout out to him. Guy who is probably the most underrated player in NBA history. At least the most underrated superstar, like bona fide, stamped, sealed, approved superstar. Grossman at 22. We're going to ignore him. He's definitely not over Giannis and Charles Barkley. What the fuck? That's stupid. Elgin Baylor, sure. Isaiah Thomas at 27. They have him over Chris Paul. I don't personally agree with that, but I also, again, that's a take where I'm like, yeah, if I believe that, that's fair. I understand how you come to that conclusion. This is another one where I'm just like, no. I consistently label Scottie Pippen as overrated, and it's for shit like this. Scottie Pippen is not a top 30 player of all time. I would go as far as to say he's not even a top 40 player of all time. He was a great fucking sidekick, and he managed to be the best player on a 50-win team after Jordan left, but he had no clutch gene at all, was not built to be a leader. He was a second guy. He was always meant to be a second guy, and because he had 1 year where the Bulls were good, people act like, he was actually held back individually by Michael. He just chose the winning. No, Scottie Pippen could have been the first option on a mid-playoff team for decades, and he would have put up better stats, and no one would have ever heard of him or really cared about him. Or he could win 6 championships and average 17 points per game because that's the type of guy he was built to be. I don't know if there is a all-time player who people more put just the what if and the prospect of ambition on how good they actually were. And that's not to say that Scottie is not an all-time great player, because I don't think he's top 40. That's still all-time great. You still make the list, no doubt about that. One of the best wing defenders ever, arguably the best wing defender ever. Really revolutionized this concept of the point forward in many ways as well, because he would be out there averaging 6-7 assists per game. I really found it endearing how much he loved to take a pull-up 3 on the fast break, because that was very anti his era. But he would do it like once or twice a game. It's very fascinating. But the fact of the matter is, his scoring game was just not that of a superstar guy. He was not in that realm as a scorer, rather simply. And that never is held against him, because he was never put in a position where it was that significantly impactful. But there would be more scrutiny there if he did not have Michael Jordan there to be the greatest fucking scorer of all time on his team. John Stockton at 29, disgusting. He would not even make my top 50. Speaking of number one, how are you a top 29 player of all time? And I'm pretty sure he has almost virtually no top 10 MVP placements. MVP 13, MVP 15, 11. There he is at 8, 10. Ooh, he got all the way up to 7 1 year. Look at you, Johnny Stock. How much you willing to bet his fucking teammate is over him? Yup. Yeah, dude. Not only is he a second option his entire career, he's a second option for the most failure duo of all time. Stockton and Malone played together for 20 years. They were also Iron Men. They never got injured. They were constantly healthy, and they very rarely made it out of the first round, routinely choked away series that they should have won. And guess what? The Jazz finally make the finals in the 90s. Guess what? Wasn't even a fucking all-star in 1998. Maybe it was just because he missed time. That's is it 1998? 64 games. There had to have been less games played that season. What the hell? So maybe that's why. But you look at his assist production, drops off, goes from leading the league, putting up crazy assist numbers, and then when his numbers go down and his usage in the offense is less significant, suddenly the Jazz are making the fucking finals. Like, look at this shit. Those numbers dip as soon as they get into that championship tier. It's because John's level of involvement in the offense was reduced. They went to a more well-rounded offensive approach. If we take a look at the playoff stats, Jeff Hornacek did more in the playmaking department. 3 assists per game. Karl Malone's getting 3. He got 4 per game off of the bench from Howard Isley. And then when you look at John throughout other years in his career, let's look at this year where this selfish-ass assist factory farm motherfucker averaged 14.5 assists per game. Look at where the rest of the team is in assists. 2.8, 2.3, 1.8, 1.8. Like, he just dominated his team's assist category. It didn't even necessarily mean that they were some phenomenal offense. Here they are. They're 10th in offense out of 27 teams. Remind you, there are like expansion teams right around the corner for them too. Maybe I'm not quite hitting that timeline right. But like, didn't even result in the greatest offense. One of the best players in the fucking planet, plus the guy leading the league in assists, and they're 10th in offensive rating. Yeah, no, dude. John Stockton, super overrated. We're not going to get into that shit any further. Over Chris Paul, suck my dick. John Havlicek, super underrated. Put up fucking LeBron numbers in his prime. I'm good with that. Kawhi is a very difficult player to rank, so I can't really fault anyone for any placement. I'm going to skim through these because this video is already 20 minutes. I'm trying to be quick about it, but my God. John Stockton over Chris Paul, Jason Kidd, and James Harden and Steve Nash, Allen Iverson. Are you fucking joking, my guy? Not even in the same stratosphere as players. Bob Cousy, I like his attitude about it because he was like chill, but I don't really fucking like when players who played very large portions of their career with virtually 0 black people on the floor. Like, I do not value or accredit segregation basketball. Same goes for Bob Pettit. Spent a good amount of his career playing nothing but a bunch of other whiteys. If you are going to prevent people from playing purely on the basis of their skin color, then I am not going to validate your hoops. So those guys could be nixed from the list as far as I am concerned. I do not care if there is a 90-year-old person watching getting mad. Hopefully you took your medication. Clyde Drexler, 39. I don't know. That feels like a 90s nostalgia thing. Like, this is not a crazy resume. Not top 39, I don't think. Like, does DeMar DeRozan not have a kind of similar? He probably doesn't have that many All-NBA teams. And he doesn't have a championship, so there is that. But he did that as a second option. Of course, we are in the territory of second options at this point, or just failed first options. But James Harden, I don't mind where James Harden was placed, but relative to some of the people who were over him, disgusting. Rick Barry is cool, very interesting player. George Gervin, cool. Walt Frazier, I think Walt Frazier is better than both of those guys, but that's fine. George Mikan, Crackerball, don't care. Anthony Davis at 45 is interesting. He's probably a pretty difficult player to rank. Kevin McHale, cool. Elvin Hayes, cool. Russell Westbrook below these guys? I mean, I guess. I think having him under AD is also fine. I don't know. I'm not very good at reacting to these lists because it's just like, I get that there's personal preference here. But so far, the John Stockton one is the really only one that I'm super upset with. Dwight Howard at 52 is too low. I know he didn't even make the fucking 75, but Dwight Howard peaked as a top 3 player in the NBA and stayed there for like 4 or 5 years, and was also like one of the greatest defensive players this game has ever seen. So I think he should be higher. Reggie Miller, that's probably too high in my opinion. He's kind of hard to evaluate though, because like you see these regular season stats, bro's regular season stats are not impressive. But like he's an all-time like playoff riser. You look at his points in the regular season versus the playoffs, and it's actually kind of wild how much of a jump he takes. So I don't know. He's kind of like a superstar in the playoffs and then a star in the regular season. And like I think he literally, 3 all NBA teams in a 18-year career is kind of crazy for a guy who's going to be ranked nearly top 50. Bill Walton, that's cool. I think that's fine. Managed to get a shitload of like a variety of accolades. Dolph Schayes. Yeah. What years did Dolph Schayes start his career? Because was he not? I'm pretty sure he was traded. No, I'm thinking of somebody else. Yeah, he played mostly in the 50s. Like, playing with Whitey Willoughby. Chris Cracker. Luka Doncic made this list at 57, and that was controversial. But you look at his stats, you look at his accolades and the time that he's played, I think it makes sense. I don't know if I'd put him as high as he made it here, but he's the only guy on this list who is an active player who is not over the age of 30. So that is pretty cool. That's something. He has basically done everything to maximize his resume without winning a championship or MVP. Those are obviously the major boxes that you want to be checking in this instance, but I think he's done pretty great outside of that. Willis Reed is cool. T-Mac at 59 is an interesting choice. Melo right next to each other. I like that they're next to each other. That makes sense. I feel like they hold a similar place in NBA history. Bob McAdoo, that's an interesting one. Awesome player early on in his career. Crazy ass numbers for the Buffalo Braves. Pau Gasol at 62 feels maybe a twinge high. James Worthy at 63, that seems a little high to me. James Worthy, definitely a dude who got a little higher on people's lists because of being associated with the Showtime Lakers, but where I think like he wasn't paired with that success, people would not have been talking about him like that. But that's just kind of the way it goes. The history is written by the victors. Word to my boy Price. Damian Lillard at 64, Embiid 66, another guy who's difficult to guard. 67 Rodman. Nah, Rodman is not better than Parrish. He's not better than Kyrie. Probably not better than Unseld. Not better than Bosch. Manu. Yeah, we did a hot takes recently where people talked about Dennis Rodman being overrated, and I was like, I don't think he's top 75, but there's a lot of guys on the list I would take off before him. That's still true, but yeah, there's a lot of guys. Alex English, I think Alex English is better than Dennis Rodman. Pete Maravich, I don't really have a great take on. Paul George at 78. Paul George was better than Dennis Rodman. I'm sorry to tell you. Maybe I just have such a bias towards offensive players, but like, guys, come on. We're making this more complicated than it needs to be. Grant Hill is cool. Tiny Archibald. I don't know much about Tiny Archibald. Couldn't really give you a great read on that one. Dikembe, yeah, we're getting into a territory. 83, Jimmy Butler. That is interesting. Yeah, maybe, I guess Jimmy is a top 100 player ever. That makes sense. Draymond Green at 88. Nah. Jesus. I still have yet to find someone I wouldn't put Draymond over. I think I'd go all the way to Rodman. Would I put him over Embiid and Vince and Dame? I don't. Dude, Draymond is seriously underrated in all-time conversations all the time just because people don't like him and because his offense is ugly and weird. But just one of the greatest defensive players who's ever played the game. One of the most transformative at that. Earl the Pearl, Chris Webber, Chauncey, Lenny Wilkins. That's interesting. 9 All-Stars, assist champion. I don't know a ton about Lenny Wilkins, so I won't weigh in there. Jason Tatum at 93. Yeah, he's definitely a top 100 player because he's especially when you consider his resume and the time that he's been playing, he has played 8 years. His numbers are good, and he's an all-star 6 out of 8 years, an all-NBA player 5 out of 8 years, gone to the conference finals multiple times. Also, regularly super healthy. He's been an Iron Man all the way up until that Achilles tear. Like, Jason Tatum absolutely deserves this place. I think that's completely reasonable. Bill Sharman, Dave DeBuscher, Joe Dumars, Bernard King. Bernard King, that's an underrated player, I think. Klay Thompson under Draymond Green. I can at least appreciate that. I appreciate that they recognize that, yeah, Klay Thompson is not over Draymond Green. Dave Bing at 99 and Artis Gilmore at 100. Yeah, this list is fine. There's nothing that flagrantly bad. I can't be too critical of it, and like the thing is, like, make your own if your list is better. I feel like a lot of people are very happy to jump to criticize, and I understand, like, I don't want to be getting on the soapbox for fucking Bleacher Report or nothing, but it's impossible to make a list that people like. There's no way to do it. I have yet to seen it done. I've seen multiple different people whose opinions I respect put out those lists, and I see some shit in there that I'm like, how the hell did you come up with that? Because there's too much history, there's too many blind spots, people are too opinionated to one thing or the other, people value completely different things. I don't know. It's a little bit silly to me to get all flustered about it, but this channel is for filler content, and consider yourself filled. That was gross. I didn't like that.